How's it, Internet? And welcome back to the Power Platform Build Along. This is episode 4, and we're talking about solution preparation. Now that we're into some of the more technical stuff, I do want to reiterate this is not the only method. This may not be the best method. This is simply my current method. So please, if you have a difference of opinion, if I'm doing it wrong, if there's a better way to do it, please let me know down in the comments of wherever you're seeing this. I'd love to have a discussion about it. That out of the way, what are we doing in this episode? Well, we've got to do the preparation for our solution. So we need to provision all the data sources for which we're using SharePoint Online. We need to create the solution in the Power Platform that all of our assets are going to go into. And we need to prepare the Canvas app. I always like to start with the data sources, which we defined in our planning last episode. So we're going to be using SharePoint Online for our data sources, but we also want the ability to replicate these data sources between different environments. When we move from dev to UAT to prod, we need to be able to make sure that all of the data sources are exactly the same. So we want to be able to replicate that. The way we are going to do it is we are going to create a JSON object with all the information we need. So what lists there are, what columns there are. And then we're going to create a Power Automate flow to create those lists automatically that we can then run against multiple different sites for our different environments. What does that JSON object look like? Well, we can see the structure here. I have a central object called lists. Underneath that is another nested object. So we've got the list title, the description, and then columns. The columns, we have two different kinds. We have the field type kind, which is SharePoint's internal mechanism for determining what type of column it is, single line of text, multiple line of text, and we have the title. You can see the full schema over here. And you can find the full breakdown of the different field types on Microsoft Learn. You can pick whichever one you want and get the corresponding value. So we take our JSON and we plug it into our Power Automate flow. We just have a manual trigger flow where we give it the site we want to create the lists in and the JSON object we just built. First thing we do is we pass that JSON so that we can use it as dynamic content down the line. The schemas like we just saw, or you can generate from the sample that is your entire JSON object, and it will create it for you. Next, we're going to send a request to the SharePoint API. We plug in the site that we already provided when we triggered the flow, and we're going to do a post to web/lists. We have the body as follows, where we put in the description and the title from our JSON. That will then automatically create the apply to each loop based on our JSON. Once we've created the list, we then need to add the columns to that list. So we send another request to the SharePoint API. Again, it's a post, again using the same site from the flow initiation to this URI where we pass in the list title, which will use the same one that's just been created in that for each loop. We then add in the field type kind to tell it what kind of column we're creating and the title and the static name. In my JSON object, I haven't differentiated between the title and the static name, although you of course can add that in. I find it just conceptually a bit easier for me to have them both use the same one, and then it should be the friendly name from the title. Again, adding these automatically creates the for each loop that will loop through each of the columns. We run this, giving the site of our dev, UAT, and prod, and it creates those lists for us. Once you have it set up, this method is much faster than creating all the lists manually. And more importantly, we can make sure that between whatever environment we're working on, all of the data sources are exactly the same, which is very important. One thing I must note is that my flow does not cater for creating document libraries. I haven't got around to it yet. So actually, if you know of the best way to do that, drop a comment down below, point me in that direction, and I'll get around to that at some point. But I just created this one manually for the purposes of our tutorials here. Now we have all our data sources. It's time to start working on the solution and the Canvas app. we need to create a new blank solution. You should always create your applications, your flows, anything you have in a solution so that it can be moved between environments. And then we're going to start preparing the Canvas app for the actual start of dev. Creating a new solution is very simple. Log into Power Apps, go to Solutions, select New Solution, give it a display name and a name, select a publisher. There will be a default, and there you go. Create it, and you have your new solution. Once you go into the solution, it's just as easy to create a blank app. We go to New, App, Canvas app, give it a name. Most of the time you're going to be using tablet, and it will then create the blank Canvas app for you. Just like a cooking show though, I've already created mine. We can open that by saying edit, although I usually go edit in new tab. The first thing we want to do in our new blank app is go to the settings pane, and under general, we are going to turn on the automatic creation of environment variables. And I like to turn on the enable app on start property, as I still find that useful. The automatic creation of the environment variables is very handy, because then when we come and we add our data sources, all of these SharePoint lists, it will automatically create in the solution that we have the environment variables. So when we move this to the next environment, to UAT or to production, we can point those variables at the new lists, and we have a seamless creation. Also in the settings page, under display, I'm going to turn off scale to fit because I want to try and make this responsive to mobile devices. You will also notice that this is not just a blank app, I have a template screen. This is because when I'm starting a new project, a new application in a solution, I want to make sure that the corporate identity and the color schemes and the controls are going to be consistent across all of the apps. So in order to do that, I create a template screen. First, I create a JSON object with 6 colors in it, one for the background, one for a secondary background, then I have primary and secondary colors. I have a text color, and I have a heading color. You can extend this as much or as little as you want, how complicated you want to make your graphic design and your color schemes. I like to do it like this. I also like using a JSON object because it gives me the opportunity to provide multiples. So when we're in testing, if we can make changes quite quickly and switch between them. Once I have my colors in place, I have all the different controls that I will require on this page, and I go through and I create the color schemes and apply them to each of the controls. I can then, when we're building the app, as you'll see, I'm going to copy paste these controls out into the main screens. There is an additional layer you can implement where you create another template screen, and instead of referencing the JSON directly, instead you reference the controls that are on your previous page. And you copy off your second page, and what that will do is if you change this page, it will then change in all of your copied controls. I tend to find that it is simpler like this, and then I only have one template screen here, so I prefer doing it like this, but your results may vary. I'm also going to be building all of this in dark mode because dark mode is best mode. All right, we've got our data sources created, we've got our solution, we've got our Canvas app that's got all the right settings and the templates and controls we want to use. So that's it for this episode. Next time, we're going to be building the new issue screen. I like to start with data capture because then down the line, we can use that data when we're building the display pages. So thank you for joining me. If you want to join us for the next one, please do hit the subscribe button in YouTube there. If you want to find the other stuff I do, you can go find all of it there in those various places, and we'll see you next time, hopefully.